All right. Starting week number 2. Day 1 of week number 2, which is day 3. Finishing up, we have a quiz today on motivation, emotion, and personality, which is units 8 and 10 in Quizlet. And obviously you can use Quizlet, you can use these lectures, you can use your notes, whatever. I'm going to go over the rest of the personality unit, and then I will push out the quiz on Classroom, which will be a Google Forms quiz, and you take that and we'll put it in PowerSchool and grade it, and everything will be good. So I'm going to go over the rest of it, and then you have until 9 o'clock p.m. today, which is Tuesday, to do the quiz. I think we left off at collective unconscious. So yesterday we talked about, for last day in class, which was Friday, we talked about Freud. We're going to talk a little bit more about Freud and then clean up the personality unit. Let me move myself up a teeny bit
The
here.
projected test with 2 people.
That's nice. No, you don't want to? That's why. Okay. Starting with collective, so there's a branch of people called I'm just going to walk through the Quizlet. Branch of people called Neo-Freudians, and those are the people that came after Freud, that believed mostly in what Freud said, but didn't buy into the whole thing, and different people didn't believe different parts of what Freud said. They mostly bought into the whole conscious, unconscious, preconscious thing, which is the iceberg metaphor of that unconscious is the stuff below the surface that you don't even have access to, and that's the most important part. That's the core of Freudian thought. And so your past, uncovering your past, is the most important part of Freud's theory. The Neo-Freudians believed that, but they kind of rejected individual other parts of what he said. Carl Jung, who is this guy, he was after Freud. He believed in most of what Freud said, but he did not believe in, I don't think we've talked about it yet, but the Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex was something that Freud believed in. He said that boys have an attraction to their mothers. He, again, not scientific, he just kind of, apparently he liked his mom, and so he thought that everybody else did too. Named after the play Oedipus Rex, where a prince accidentally marries his mom in a faraway land, finds out that it's mom, and then gouges his eyes out. So he named it the Oedipus complex. Anyway, Jung said, nah, there's no way that's true. I definitely don't like my mom. And so he rejected the Oedipus complex, but he came up with the collective unconscious, which is also, the whole Freudian, everything relating to Freud is pretty mystical and out there, not really scientific, but it's still important to learn about today. The collective unconscious is Jung's thought that not only is there an unconscious for an individual person, but there's also an unconscious for like groups of people. So our nation has one collective unconscious, which is sort of like this set of unknown beliefs that we all come loaded with in America, or even the AP Psych Spring 2020 class would have one collective unconscious made up of all of our experiences, and then we all, based on those experiences, have these unconscious thoughts that are in common with all these people. So he called that the collective unconscious. Projective tests. So projective tests are, I'm going to bring up my projective tests here. Actually, it'd be regular psych. Personality. Okay, so projective tests. Since Freud said that the unconscious was the most important part of your personality, that presents a problem, because by definition with the unconscious, you don't know what it is. And if it's the most important thing, then you have to find a way to uncover it. And that becomes the purpose of projective tests, which are the thematic apperception test is a projective test, the Rorschach's a projective test, free association, dream interpretation, they're all projective tests, they're ambiguous tests where you can answer multiple different ways. There's not really a right answer, and it's designed to project your unconscious onto the test. One of them is the thematic apperception test. And let's start with the Rorschach. The Rorschach, named after the guy that made one of the first versions of it. I forget his first name, but last name was Rorschach, and it is this. So a therapist will hold, and by the way, these are the actual Rorschach inkblot tests that are used still, these actual inkblots. But they'll hold up a card like this big, and they'll say basically, what do you see here? And anything you say matters. Like if you say, I see a bat here, or I see a mask, or I see whatever. If you ask to rotate the card, they would write that down. If you comment on texture instead of overall picture, they'd write that down. If you say lots of things, they'd write that down. Even if you say, I don't see anything, they'd write that down. Everything means something. Same thing with dream analysis. They dive so deep into meaning, where arguably they're probably finding meaning in things that have no meaning. But I'm not a Freudian, so. But you're trying to look for overall themes of like, well, I see blood. If you see blood, then maybe you're projecting some sort of a violent past, or you're projecting some fear or anxieties or something like that. So you go through all these, and then they would ask you what you see, and you'd say what you see, and then they make their analysis off that. That's the Rorschach test. It's a shame we don't have class, because we spend a lot of time in class going over these, but it doesn't really make sense over a video like this. I like to keep the videos short and concise if possible. The thematic apperception test, very similar, but instead of an inkblot, it's two people in an ambiguous situation. So your purpose here is to say what these people were doing before this, what they're currently doing, what they're going to do, and what they're thinking or feeling right now. Like, for instance, I'll just put myself out there. For this one, you could say it's two scientists, but more important than that, but what are they doing? And are these peers? Is this a teacher and this is a student? How is she feeling? For me, it seems like this is the student, this is the teacher, and she is judging the student, and the student's very anxious. And there's no reason that has to be the case. That's me sort of projecting my own, I guess, anxieties or sense of inadequacy or something like that. That's what a Freudian would say. That in this ambiguous situation, I'm seeing that this person is anxious and feels inferior, so that might be what I'm thinking in my unconscious. So that's the thematic apperception test. Rorschach is inkblot. Thematic apperception test, two people in an ambiguous situation. Free association is that's the, if you see a movie where there's like the red leather couch, that's the free association. The point of free association is there's a therapist, he says just start talking. And the theory is that eventually you'll talk about what's bothering you. So you say, the therapist says start talking. You say, what do you want to talk about? He says, I don't know. Just start talking and see where it leads. And then you start talking, and then maybe eventually you're talking about when you were 7 and your dad didn't love you or something like that. But that's the point of free association, is if you talk long enough and just keep talking, then eventually you will talk about important things that would reveal your unconscious. Dream interpretation. Freud got famous in the first place for writing his book, The Interpretation of Dreams, at the turn of the 1900s, which would be the 20th century. That's what made him famous in the first place. But he went real deep with dreams and the meaning of dreams, where each individual thing in a dream has a meaning. Some people believe that, some people don't. I tend to think that maybe general themes of dreams can have meanings, but like Freud would say, if your teeth fall out in a dream, it means this specific thing. If you're falling in a dream, it means this specific thing. If you're climbing a ladder, it means this specific thing. And his book was just a list of thousands of scenarios that and what their meaning was. Oedipus complex, we've talked about. Freud said that boys have an attraction to their mothers. Collective unconscious, was that up here also? It was. It's in there twice. All right. Myers. Okay, so now we're getting away from. Let me see if there's any more Freud before we kill Freud. No, well, sort of. The Electra complex is the the complement to the Oedipus complex, where girls have an attraction to their fathers. Anyway, it's important to learn about because they're theories, but just know that it's not scientific, and there's a lot of people that think Freud did a little bit too much cocaine. Myers. Okay, so now we're moving on to personality test. Myers-Briggs is. I'll provide a link so you can take a free version of the Myers-Briggs. There's a one from Human Metrics that's pretty good. This one. You can go through and enter all these, and it'll give you your Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs types is the test that probably most of you have taken, and there are 16 possible types. Your first letter can either be I or E for introvert or extrovert, then S or N, or is your second letter F or T for your third letter, and then J or P for your fourth letter. And it breaks down these different personalities types. It's probably, or at least used to be, the most widely used personality test. There were a lot of problems with it in terms of it did not use scientific methods for its creation. They just kind of wrote questions, and so its validity is in question, but it is still the most widely used test. The MMPI is not a personality test, it's a psychopathology test. And there used to be a really nice free version online, and that has been since removed because the people want to charge you money to take it. But let me see if I can find an answer sheet here, and I'll show you what kind of things it... Great. Okay, so it's this enormous... I used to have access to a question sheet. It was like 700 questions long. But instead of introvert or extrovert or whatever, it gives you psychopathology ratings. So here's hypochondriasis, which is a oversensitivity to being sick, depression, hysteria, psychopathic deviance, masculinity, femininity, paranoia, psychoasthenia, schizophrenia, hypomania, social introversion. It goes on and on. There's more than that, but it's a psychopathology test. So that's not a personality test. Then there is the Big Five personality test, and the acronym for that is CANOE. So remember CANOE. And whereas the Myers-Briggs is 4 letters, this is 5, and it's conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and extroversion. So those are the tests that we learn about in this class, and you can kind of, at least for the Big Five and the Myers-Briggs, pretty easy to find free tests online. So not many terms left, and then I'll send out the quiz and you take the quiz. The locus of control test, which we actually, funny enough, just talked about yesterday in sociology, but locus of control, there's another free test for that, which is really interesting. I'll send this out as well. It's the first one that comes up. And you answer these questions, and then it'll give you a score out of 13. So let me just do the top response for everything here. And then it will pop out a number between 0 and 13. Locus of control, which, by the way, you should do this test. It doesn't take you long. The lower the score is, the more internal your locus. I haven't explained what it is yet, but a low score is internal, high score is external. I think probably in class the highest scores I've ever seen were like 11, and the lowest scores I've ever seen were maybe 2. And a lot of people get in the 6-7 range, which would be kind of in the middle. But what locus of control is it is whether you think that what happens to you is because of luck on the external side, or if it's because of your own actions, which would be on the internal side. So if you believe these would be internal things to believe. Like, good things happen to good people for the most part. Bad things happen to bad people. If you try hard in life, generally speaking, you will succeed. If you're nice to people, you'll have friends. If you try hard at McGinnis, you'll get good grades. If you get good grades, you'll get into a good college. If you try hard in college, you'll get a good job, things like that. If you believe those things, then you probably have an internal locus of control. External locus of control would be saying things like, I believe sometimes just stuff happens. You can have bad luck. The most important thing to getting a job is knowing the right people. Sometimes I study for a quiz really hard and I fail. Sometimes I don't study at all and I get 100 on a quiz. Just more saying luck or fate are the main driving forces of what happens to you. That would be external locus of control. And last term, spotlight effect, and then we're done. Spotlight effect is you tend to think that people are paying more attention to you than you are. Like, the example I always give is right now my hair's pretty long, but whenever I used to get a haircut in college, I'd go get my haircut and then I'd walk around the mall where I got my haircut, and I'd feel really self-conscious because I feel like people were looking at me because I felt different about my hair. But in reality, no one even knows who I am. So of course, no one cares what my hair looks like because they didn't know what it was before. But the spotlight effect, you feel like people are watching you a lot more than you are. And that's the unit. So the quiz, which will be on Classroom, is over units 8 and 10 on Quizlet. And that actually wraps up everything we need to know for the entire AP test this year. However, in the next couple weeks, at least, maybe 3 weeks, we're going to go over the stuff that they're not quizzing you over because we have a lot of time and it's really important stuff to know about. Plus, we get to go kind of at our own pace and talk about what we want to talk about rather than what the College Board says we have to talk about, which is great. Which mostly will be the same anyway, but it does give us a little bit more flexibility. So we'll start doing abnormal disorders next day in class, which will be Thursday, which will be great. And that's it. So also, as usual, we have the Zoom call at 1 o'clock, which is kind of like a tutorial. So if you have any questions, you can be there and ask me the questions. And that's it. Hope you guys have a good day.